Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to episode 81, which is called Willing Witness. And we have Fwoot and Lilia today. So if you guys want to say hi and say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Hi, so my name is Lilia. I am 25. I am from Ontario, Canada. I've been reading Purple Hyacinth since it was on Discover, and I've been reading webtoons for, I guess, since 2015. And yeah, nice to be here.
Hi, I'm Fwoot. I've been here a couple times now. I've been reading Purple Hyacinth for almost 2 years now, and I spend a lot of my time on the Purple Hyacinth Discord.
Yep, I'm putting together great server events like one we're having now. So thank you for all your dedication and work.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Okay, so what happened last episode was, so just a quick summary. She walked into the station, everyone's like, okay, this girl is shady. And she gets interrogated, and Herman says he wants to have someone watch her at all times. She gets walked home by, forgot the guy's name, blonde person. Andrew? No, forgot. And then guess who shows up at her house? Kieran. And he tells her, and this is what we start out with, I have what you need to prove Scythe's guilt in Qiao's case. And yeah, looking mighty fun. So, and then we cut to Lauren being all sneaky at night. And it's very funny. Like, Sophism and F have this they can create a lot of comedy, and they're like over the top motions, because she's looking like a little bit like a samurai, which you remember when they were on the rooftop. She has this like hood on, she whooshes it on, and she's wearing a trench coat, which is like the epitome of like shadiness, and spy thing. And she looks out the window, and there she is hopping from rooftop to rooftop again. It's very comedic. Like, you see them all the way in the very like first couple of episodes when Lauren is chasing after Kieran. They're also like zooming along on the roof, and they're streaks. You can't even see them. It's just very funny. They have this like supernatural speed.
Yeah, it's like Ninja Lauren making a return.
I love the architecture like behind them. It really establishes the world. It's a bit of medieval, a bit of Victorian. I just really want to live in Ardhalis. I mean,
actually,
yeah,
there's a movie for you. Have you seen Paris at Midnight?
No,
I think it's a Woody Allen movie.
I don't think I have.
Yeah, I think it is. So it's basically about a guy who loves the 1920s, and he just lusts after that time period. He thinks that's amazing. He loves it, and then he ends up going back to the 1920s. When he's in the 1920s, he meets this girl who's from that time period, and she loves the 1860s, and she's dying to go to the 1860s, and she falls in love with him, or sorry, he falls in love with her, and they end up both going back to the 1860s, and she wants to stay there. She's like, I love this time period, I want to stay in the 1860s. And then he basically, the whole epiphany of the movie is like, he realizes that you won't necessarily be happier in a different time period, and he just goes back to his present, I think. But I totally get it, because I'm a big fan of the Victorian time period, and I probably wouldn't want to be a Victorian woman because I have a lot of rights right now, and more opportunities. Yeah. But I totally get it. There's a lot that I like about the time period too, like the chivalry. I like the modesty. I'm very pro. I grew up in a very, like I said, religious culture and very conservative. And that's kind of one thing that I did retain. So I do like that. I guess I relate to it. It's how I grew up. So anywho,
I mean, on one hand, almost no women's rights, but on the other, a pretty dress. And the pretty dress is a very tempting offer.
Does the pretty dress win?
Yeah. But then again, it's only good if you're rich. Like, any time period, like if you go backwards, it's only good if you're rich.
Right. It's not like the men had a lot more opportunities also, unless they were wealthy, I mean, trust me, I read a lot. Basically, they had 3 choices in their life. If they were wealthy, they had 3 choices. If you were the oldest son, you inherited the estate. If not, you could be go into law or go into the military. That was it. Like, basically, like, you have nothing. You didn't have a lot of choice in your life. So yeah, I'm happy we live in this time period.
Yeah. And then the girls just become wives and mothers or nuns if they have the church around.
Right. Oh yeah, sorry, the priesthood. They could also become a priest. But yeah. Anywho,
But
so
women
she's
receive
zooming
like
along.
little,
What?
women receive like a lot of women didn't receive a lot of education. Like it was seen as a like it's pointless to educate a woman in some time period, which like it's nonsense. Because a lot of like some of the brilliant minds in like math, for example, because I menored in math, and a lot of the names that come up are like women, or like sometimes you'd have the wife do a lot of work and then the husband would take all the credit. Yeah,
Right.
not fun.
Yeah, no, it's amazing when you think about the level of like public education that you have these days. Like back then, like only if you were rich you got educated, both men and women, and people were like not literate. Anywho, soliloquy and wonderfulness of passage of time. So we get to Lauren, you see, is hopping around to Kieran's apartment because we're back at number 16. Do we know his street name or just number 16?
I don't think we know his street name, but I'm pretty sure we knew his apartment number at one point.
Yeah, so it's number 16, like that we see it right here on the door. So and it was actually Girl Wonder did I shouldn't say this, but anyway, Girl Wonder did a trivia. This was one of the questions. What was the she did a Purple Hyacinth trivia episode, and one of the questions was what's his apartment number, and I thought it was 17, so it was so close.
Well,
I thought
I think we had that. Yeah. Oh, we had that in the trivia night we did.
We did?
Right now.
Wait, did we do it for the Jeopardy?
I think so. I think yeah.
It might have been in the Kahoot.
Maybe.
Unsure. I don't remember that question, but it might have been there. I
mean, so she's at his house and she's not supposed to be anywhere, right? Like we know she's supposed to be under lock and key and supervision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she's taking a risk.
Yeah. When he says like, officer, pleasure to meet, it's a pleasure to see you. It kind of just reminds me of Kieran in episode 50 when he lied about how he was excited to work with like Kim and Will and the people at the office. I hope that he's more excited to see the other people now, like how he is happy to see her, because he's not lying here. But I hope.
Love it. He really is happy to see her. I'm so excited.
He didn't know she'd come. He's mildly surprised and happy about it.
Also, I don't know if you noticed, but his shirt looks really open to me here. Just I don't know if it's like my daughter who's 9, she would say he's flexing.
Oh. And the high bun, like don't get me started on the high bun.
He brought back the titty window.
He has a towel around his neck, which is like also a sign of like he's casual. He's in his house. He was, I don't know, washing his hair or something. But yeah, she knocks on the door, he opens up and he's like, yeah, I didn't know you'd come. And then she gives him this deadpan face. She's like, this was your plan. It was risky to leave my house. What was so necessary that you absolutely had to drag me here? Hope you didn't make me cross the whole 11th district for nothing. So right, so we know that they're on opposite sides of the 11th district.
Funny story. I think I've told you this last time, but back on Purple Garden, F used to answer questions that she had, like, or that she got on the Purple Garden. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore on the Phantom Scythe server. But one of the questions was like something about where Kieran lived, and she said that Kieran lived in the 11th district or precinct, and that sent everyone into chaos because previously we all thought that he was in the 6th, and so for like about 2 days there was just screaming over where was Kieran's house. Eventually we were able to settle on a spot, and then F came in and she actually confirmed it, and we basically peaked that day.
Next up. So I'm just looking up all these months. Yeah. So when I went to France is divided into arrondissements, and I was wondering if this, since I know they're from Quebec, I was wondering if they divide into districts because of that. And I do see they do divide into districts, Quebec, but it's like Beauport, Charlesbourg, La Cité, Limoilou. It's not numbered. But anyway, the concept of being divided, I guess, is maybe inspired by that.
Ardhalis is also inspired off both Paris. I believe it's Paris. It might just be overall France. It's inspired by both Paris and London, and we actually see part of that in the Great Chapel, which is a reference to Whitechapel, which is where the Jack the Ripper murders were, if I'm not wrong. And then also the map, if you overlay a map of Ardhalis over a map of London, you'll see that the river actually lines up in a certain spot. It's like a zoomed in version of the map of London. We even got some bridges in the same spots.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's cool. That makes sense. The architecture is definitely so a lot of the architecture, like if you go scroll back a little bit with the roof thing, that looks like some British architecture, like Shakespearean-ish. The houses that have the panels, like the white with like the wooden beams across the front. So that's, I mean, I'm not super in architecture, like I'm not so knowledgeable. I did read one book about architecture, but I forgot everything I read.
There were some houses, I don't remember. There were some buildings, I don't remember which episode. It might have been like episode 44 when when Lauren went to Kim's house, and it looked a lot like sort of London. I'm not sure where these houses are in London, but it might be like downtown London. I don't know. But like sort of like the square windows, the little things, the parts of the stone that come out a bit. I'm not, and then the like fence. I have no idea how to describe this. But yeah, it's very London-y.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say, having we spent like the whole we spent like 10 days in Europe last winter for our 10-year anniversary, and my husband's actually from Holland, so like he's from Europe. But anyway, I came back to America and I was like, we don't have any pretty buildings. Everything's so pretty over there.
Oh yeah, so. I felt that. My dad's family is from Italy, and so we used to go visit like before pandemic, and the architecture is always so pretty there. We have none of that like over here.
I know. A few federal buildings and stuff like that, but yeah, nothing. Anywho, let's not be fast. So Kieran is being very cute and adorable, and he has this is like a typical Kieran, he does this over exaggerated stateliness, which is his signature. I don't know, I guess we could sit and analyze why. Maybe you could say like he wants to, maybe because he's naturally a gentleman, or you could say that because of his profession, because of what he does, he wants to kind of be the opposite of that and be as civilized and refined as he can be. But he bows and he says, "Why, of course not. Please step inside my humble abode." Just sweet. And she comes in, and then he's like, "Would you like some refreshments, water, tea, maybe?" I mean, he's being extremely hospitable. And I think some of it is like a little bit of snarkiness, but I do think some of it is genuine. I think he's happy to see her, happy to have a friendly face, because we know he doesn't really have friends, and he's probably feeling lonely. So this is like, Lauren's kind of like his only friend that we know of. So he's probably happy to have a friendly face in his house.
And like, she's the only person who's been to his apartment, I think, because he said like in episode 36, I believe, like 37, no one else has been here before. And now he's inviting her back. Like, that was sweet.
When Lauren comes inside, it almost sort of seems like she hesitates for a moment. Like there's a panel of her just standing there, and then she walks in.
Yeah, she starts looking around, and like I actually was talking to Fwoot about this before the podcast, but like compare what she did to Kim in episode 63, where she comes in, she throws her jacket on the sofa, she's like home sweet home, and then she makes herself comfortable, and then you have Lauren who keeps her jacket on. She's like, make this quick, like I don't want to be here longer than I have to. Like a huge contrast between the two, and I understand why Lauren would do that, but it's just, yeah, I thought the contrast would be interesting to point out.
It's also the lighting is a lot colder in this scene than it is in that scene, and to be fair, this is at nighttime and Kieran doesn't have, it seems, so much good lighting, but it's just the scene gives up a lot more colder vibes than when Kim went over to Will's house, because at Will's house the lighting's much warmer, it's more comforting. It's also, the house is less bare as well, but then again, Kieran doesn't have as much money as Will. And something
also, Will's in his parents' home, right? And his parents have this whole status thing going on and appearances to maintain. And I don't think Kieran would even be interested in that. I don't think, it sounds like he has enough money, at least from what he says. So he seems satisfied with what he has. I think he's, he doesn't need much space, and he just wants to have a place that has his books, probably, like a safe place to be. I don't think he's into like the posturing that Will's parents are. Or, you know, even if it's not posturing, like they come from money and it's a long line of money and that's just the standard in their family.
I just noticed something in the panel where Kieran's at his stove and Lauren's approaching the table. There are two types of chairs there. We see a stool and we see an actual chair, and it kind of makes me think that the reason that even though the table can seat two people and he only has one chair, it's sort of just like he lives alone. That's just another reminder that he lives alone. He doesn't have a proper second chair for someone else at that table.
Oh, I did not notice that. So he
I
probably
just-
grabbed the chair that's in the drawing room, I would say.
Chair over for her.
Oh, true.
Let's just
He
go
has
with
a chair
that.
there. I would rather that chair breaks though. That chair can burn. Use it as firewood.
Well, now that he moved it, we can maybe take a look on what's on the table.
So yeah, so she decides, you know, she says coffee black, a gallon, please, right? Because clearly she doesn't sleep enough. And he's like, haha, sure, but I think the news I have will be enough to keep you awake. It's cute. He's laughing. Like they're, you know, it's a jovial relationship and he's getting her stuff. I think this is very healthy, you know, this is like a normal, healthy encounter. I mean, it isn't a normal, healthy encounter really, because it's like a whole detective thing. But that aside, like they're having a normal encounter. And yeah, and she says like, we should make this quick. I have to go back before they notice I'm gone. So maybe not the most normal. And she says, so earlier today, you said you found a witness and his table is filled with, there's like the lamp on the table and it's filled with, it's scattered with like books and papers and files. So yeah, so this is probably all the stuff that he wants to show her. So he says, after hearing about your little misadventures with our good friend's sake, I couldn't resist the temptation to look into Chow's case file. And he's preparing coffee for her meanwhile. The way 𝗏 wormed out at a suspicion was actually quite clever. And you see an image of him playing gambling or playing cards with two other gentlemen. He's looking very sullen in that picture, by the way. And he says, right after the poker game, he visited his neighbor to have a beer with him purposefully to be seen at home at night. Then he snuck out of the apartment to murder Chow and went straight to Maria's after to hide the murder weapon. And, you know, you see an image of him going out of the apartment and a knife, a bloody knife. And she says, correct. And he says, I read the transcripts too. You really did lose it, officer. And your hair trigger temper hasn't changed much since. And he's smiling and laughing at that.
Yeah, it almost reminds you of the old, kind of their old loon days where they could joke around with that, like having to walk on eggshells.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good observation about her. He's frustrated.
I'm a bit unsure. How did Kieran come across this information? Did he look through like a PS case or did he look through just the police transcript? Because if it was just the police transcript, then he shouldn't have known most of this. Unless he made a lot of assuming and a lot of guesses and leaps.
Well, okay, yeah, I think the part about the visiting the neighbor, that was probably in the police files, right? Because
Yeah.
like, that's his alibi. And then sneaking out, and yeah, the next part seemed, I guess, like his deductions. So he also has some, you know, detective skills like Lauren. Presumably, like I don't think that PS would keep files like that, you know, like, oh, this is how Kevin, you know, he murdered someone. I don't know.
Yeah,
And I
it'd
don't
be
know
in their
how
best
easily
interest to
they'd
get rid
be
of it.
found. There was a Harvey file, but I'm not sure where they're stored or how
Yeah.
easily they can be found and accessed by people like him.
Like you'd think it would be in their best interest to get rid of that stuff because, you know, it could get tracked. But yeah, where did that Harvey file go?
It seems very secretive, so I'm surprised they keep that stuff like written down, you know, especially
True.
the links that they take to like disguise their identities and not know each other. But anyway, Lauren, you know, she has this intense face. She always has an intense face. When she hears that, she's like, yeah, you know, she acknowledges that she has a hair trigger temper. And then, you know, Kieran says, but with an ability like yours, it would have driven anyone to the edge. And the look that he has on his face is pretty serious. You know, he's not joking around. And he often jokes, right? He often uses humor and sarcasm. But here he's being serious. He's really addressing her seriously. And, you know, like giving her validation that her emotional experience was valid, which is a very affirming thing of him to do.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. Like, you know, he's willing to see things from her perspective. Like, he might not agree with what she did, but at least he's like, I don't know, willing to sympathize. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you. Like, I think Kieran kind of wonders what it would be like if he had her ability as well, and like what he would be able to catch on his own. It kind of, I do hope we get to see Lauren's ability a bit more in coming episodes, because I think that her usage of it has gone down a bit, especially now that they're not doing loon missions anymore. But then again, the lie was most important during the 𝗪𝗏𝗃 case, and that's where they got the most use out of it. After that, it's been kind of dormant, I'd say. So I do hope we get more situations in the future where she gets to use her ability. I think that's one of my smaller critiques of PH, is that I feel like there's a lot of potential to be used with her ability, especially since of how unique it is, but there aren't many situations where she really gets to anymore. And this is random, but it looks like something through Kieran's window is reflecting, like lighting him, and on his, or on the left side of the panel, it kind of looks like the silhouette of a ship, maybe carrying in something like nitroglycerin.
Ooh, oh my gosh, like the imported weapons.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a ship. I can't really tell. But yeah, there's something shining through Kieran's window, reflecting onto him.
I thought that was a pier.
Oh yeah, it could be the pier. I mean, he's right on the water, but he's not near the docks, which is weird.
And that's supposed to be like the poorer part of the district. But I mean, to me, it sounds like it should be more expensive than the, like, to have that kind of view.
But is it on the poorer side of town, like, or near pier? I wasn't aware of that.
I mean,
Maybe
we're assuming it is, because like that's, I guess, where the new money people live, like not, but the richer people, like I guess where Lauren lives, since she's on the other side of the district, she's with the, I think I've said she's near the Nightingale Bar. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah,
which is like
Lauren's up
the
north.
north side.
Something I think, okay, so I think for newer people, honestly, I would expect them more around the first precinct. Like, I don't know, something about Allendale kind of just gives me like younger, hipper people vibes. But I think Kieran, where Kieran lives, is actually would be one of the cheaper properties of the 11th precinct, because although the 11th precinct is pretty wealthy, Kim doesn't appear to be that wealthy, so it's probably a mix of upper class and middle class people, and then the other districts in the area, so like 12, 13, and 1, those are the richer ones. Again, the most wealthy people in Ardhalis aren't going to aren't going to be the entire populations of these 4 districts, but so it's probably a mix of upper class and middle class, with certain areas of each precinct being more dedicated to richer people, like we see with Lauren and Will's families, if that makes sense. And then I would guess that where Kieran lives is one of the properties aren't worth as much as they would be where Lauren is, again, because it's more middle class people living in that area. And even though it is a waterfront property because it's right on the river, it is on the border of the 6th precinct and some of the poor precincts and the precincts on the South Shore. So people, if you have money, you would probably want to invest in a property that isn't very close to whom you consider to be like the plebeians.
And it might be seen as safer, because I guess crime in Great Chapel is pretty bad, you would assume. But
Yeah.
Also Kieran, maybe he chose that specific location because it's closer to, I guess he is from Great Chapel, I think F mentioned that, so maybe he chose to be closer to where his old neighborhood was.
But also not in his old neighborhood, which I totally understand. Like, he probably doesn't want to be there.
And also the Phantom Scythe mainly operates out of the South Shore, I believe. Like, we got Great Chapel down there, or we got Great Chapel and the Grim Goblin down in the South Shore. So it makes sense that Kieran would want to live near a place where he works, and his apartment is like right in between the 11th precinct and some PS spaces, which is very convenient for him.
Yeah, it's just separated by the bridge.
I get the sense, at least, that he wants to, in his own private life, in his home, to be removed from his work. So he's not in Great Chapel directly, because probably it's also depressing for him, honestly, to be reminded of where he grew up and how he grew up. So I feel like he chose a place that's at least removed from it, so he has that peace and quiet in his home.
Right.
It's also
His home does seem very peaceful. You also see, by the way, he invested in his home. Like his home looks nice. Like it's not bare. It's not like, it has decent furniture. He has rugs and it looks like homey. He's made it a nice place for himself. Like he has furniture. He has cooking ware. He's not like just living there sleeping on the floor on a mattress or something.
When I said it was bare earlier, I meant like compared to Will's house, that it's more like scaled down in extravagance. Bare was probably not the best word to use then. It's simpler, but also very so like, what's the right word? Comforting, I guess. Homey, like you said.
I'm ready to move in with Kieran, just saying. Also, he has a lot of books. And so, yeah, books are my favorite. Anyway, as soon as I see them, so basically, like, if I would ever, I'm not single, right? Obviously, I've been married for like 11 years, but if I would ever meet somebody and they didn't have books, that would be like an instant no. Sorry.
It's the same for me.
Yeah. So yeah, so Kieran is so far on the checklist. I mean, assassin, maybe, but yeah. So anyway, Lauren says here, she says, we're going back to the hair trigger temper. She says, still not an excuse to slam people into walls, though. So she has that self-awareness, right? That what she did was not really smart. I mean, in terms of like definitely getting more information out of Seiko, we mentioned this before, like she could have gotten a lot more information if she would have not have lost her temper and slammed them into the wall, because that was the end. Like not only was her investigation of Seiko ended then, but her whole career as a detective also. So it was really not a very wise decision, or not even, I don't think it was a decision. I think her emotions overcame her. And then Kieran's response is very crucial, because he says, yeah, it is not. I should know. And he's looking down and away from her. And we're pretty sure he's thinking about how he lost his cool and his temper and went insane after Lauren called him a monster in episode 43.
Yeah. I think it's still not an excuse to slam people into walls, though. It's kind of sort of like, it kind of reminds me how like in sort of like in the US, even if you're guilty, you still get some basic rights and you still like get some like respect and protection from harm until like, I don't know, you're in jail. But
not from public opinion though.
Yeah. And I don't know, this is kind of just another analogy I have in my head. I've seen people use it a few times in the past where it's like, even if you have like bad mental health, it's still not an excuse to be a bad person to others. So you can't really use it as, like she said, you can't really use things like these as an excuse to be a bad person. And her slamming Seiko into a wall isn't really a great thing to do. Like, even if he is guilty, I would argue that Lauren shouldn't have slammed him into a wall, even if she knew he was guilty, if that makes sense. It's not very well said.
Yeah, it does. So it's not usually how you'd go about proving somebody's guilt. Like she would not get anything out of it. But I guess her emotions took over that moment, and she wasn't thinking clearly.
Yeah, in a civilized, law-bound society, you try to not go by your emotions, you go by the rules, right? And let that govern your behavior. So, yeah, and also he wasn't proven guilty at all there. So, her behavior was completely uncomfortable. But anyway, so that's a pivotal moment where, Kieran is basically admitting his guilt and he didn't say, I'm sorry. He's not saying I'm sorry in this situation, but he's basically saying I was wrong to do what I did, in a backhanded way. So that's a big step. And that's a healthy step, because, when people do things wrong, right, that's human, that's normal, especially like for such a background that he has. Obviously, like, he's clearly messed up, and people who come from abusive situations obviously don't have the same baseline that people who didn't come from that situation have, and they can do things that are not that great. But here he's taking responsibility for what he did and admitting that what he did was wrong. And that's crucial.
And I really think they should take it a step further and actually talk about it. Like, I get that he didn't bring it up when he was apologizing back in 59 because like she was distressed back then thinking about like the bombing and all. But so it wouldn't have been a good time to like talk about it. So he just like glossed over it. But it still hasn't brought up afterwards. Like I think at some point they're gonna have to talk about it because it's still like lingering. It's still there. Like it's not gonna go anywhere until they properly address it, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember if Lauren has apologized to him for calling him a monster.
Nope.
But I do hope she does at some point because I do think she was in the wrong when she did that. And although what Kieran did was definitely worse, I think she should still apologize because like calling someone a monster is pretty serious, especially when it is like a very serious topic for them. And so I'm still waiting for Lauren to apologize to Kieran after that because he's done it like 2 times now.
I
That
don't
apology is overdue, honestly. She needs to apologize.
I don't think she needs to apologize. I don't think so, because I think that in many ways Kieran is a monster. But I think that as their relationship progresses and she understands him more, I think she'll understand how much her words hurt him. And I think that if they have a discussion about it, which I hope they will, she'll say, hey, Kieran, I don't think you're a monster. And that will be very healing and redemptive for him to hear. So I'm hoping that something like that will happen. But I don't think that they had enough of a relationship at that point for her to need to apologize for that. Kieran is an assassin. He did just murder all those people without telling her. And I understand that, and she was distrustful of him to begin with. Like, she always thought of him as a monster, and she just started to get to know him. So I don't think that, he had a right to expect anything else of her, really.
Yeah, we definitely see Kieran not lose his cool when people call him a monster in like 40 in episodes before, like right at the beginning. Lauren called him a monster at some point and he was just completely chill, but I still think she should apologize for that, because yeah, he has killed people. Yeah, he is like technically a terrible person. A lot of it is he's forced to do it, and Lauren should probably know this. Like in the Phantom Scythe, it is do this or you die. It's a terrorist and radical organization. It's a basic assumption that we already recognized before Sandman told her. And so Lauren should already know that in the Phantom Scythe, the stakes are very high, and those stakes are your life. And for Kieran, it makes sense for him to do the job, because if he doesn't do the job, then he'll be killed and then someone else will step in for him. So it's like the trolley problem, and you're driving the trolley. You can either choose to die yourself, so kill one person, or you can choose to kill how many other people and save your own life. However, there is a trolley behind you, and that will be your replacement if you decide to kill yourself instead. So regardless, if like Kieran kills himself, then it's just going to be another number into the pile of people who are dead. The people he would have killed are going to be dead anyway, so there's no point in him removing himself from the equation, especially
Right.
Since he's such a powerful player at this point. He has the ability to take down the Phantom Scythe. So just strategically, if he wants to save more lives, then he has to kill the people now. If that makes any sense. I'm sure it doesn't. I'm
yeah,
so
like
sorry.
a moral dilemma. Yeah, it does make sense.
It definitely does. And
It's like very gray morals, but like he's sacrificing a few for like a bigger cause.
Mm-hmm.
And these people will be dead anyways, like regardless of whether he told her or not. Like, she's not mad I mean, technically by their deal, she was mad because he didn't tell her beforehand, not at the actual murders. I mean, she's upset at the actual murders, but the only thing he did wrong, technically, by their deal, is that he didn't tell her beforehand.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think that this is also part of Lauren's growth as a person, because she was there's the whole element where he she was more sheltered as a wealthier person, and he's telling her, he's kind of waking her up and saying, hey, listen, the poor people haven't been paying any attention to, and maybe you could understand them a little bit more. So there's that element of her waking up to that. And then there's also the whole moral boundary between good and evil. That is also something that is opening up to her, because she's like, oh, I'm a police officer, I'm on the side of the right, Phantom Scythe, everyone, the Phantom Scythe is terrible. So this is something like she's learning as well, and we as the characters, the readers, are also learning to have more complexity in our moral judgment. But I understand her reaction. And yeah, you know what, I wonder if there was an element of her that also deliberately threw that word in his face, because it was the most painful thing she could think of to say to him.
Mm-hmm. Something I wrote a while back on the old server was it's want versus need. Lauren doesn't actually need to have good morals to be a good person in society's eyes, because she's already a police officer working to protect people. The good morals she does have aren't out of necessity. Kieran, on the other hand, is basically viewed as the bottom of the bucket of society. If he is to have hope in himself, he needs to have good morals, because occupation can't cover that for him. So that's why Lauren has more sort of, I guess we consider villainy traits, or sort of like an anti-hero, whereas Kieran's traits we see to be more like heroic and smiled upon. Even though that was back in September, and right now I'm currently on the side that you can't really morally compare them yet, or at all. You can't really say one is more morally worse than the other, because both have gone through different experiences and both are faced with different moral challenges. So we don't know how Lauren would act in Kieran's shoes, and we don't know how Kieran would act in Lauren's shoes, and therefore we cannot compare them morally.
Yeah, they're totally different circumstances.
Good point. Yeah,
definitely. I have one of my husband's really good friends grew up in a very, very like crazy abusive household, like to the extent that one of his parents accidentally killed one of his siblings because they were beating them so much that they died.
oh my God.
Like just like torture, like the worst possible cases you could read about, like just extreme torture. And he grew up and he got married to this girl from a totally normal family. Like he grew up also super poor, and he married this girl from like a upper middle class family, very normal, healthy life family, very comfortable. And they were in love in the beginning because they were kind of young and foolish, in my opinion. And they didn't realize that the difference in backgrounds would cause like a ton of strife in their relationship. And anyway, they had a lot of difficulties in their life together. But the husband would get very, very triggered very easily. And he was always, he was the one in charge of the family's finances, because the wife never expected to work, because like she grew up in a soccer mom kind of house, right? And this was something that was like, they were very poor, and they were like, anyway, he was under a lot of stress. And his reactions were like, when I would view them from the outside, you would be like, this guy is crazy. He yells, he screams, he's extremely under pressure. And like I would call him emotionally abusive to his wife. But coming from where he came from, he never laid a hand on his wife, and he was extremely good to his children. Like he never hit his children, and he actually was just a good dad. Like he never even yelled at his children. He was like a good dad. And it was incredible, because there were parts of me that like despised him, because I was like, you're just a nasty person to your wife. But the other part of me recognized that the fact that he didn't touch his wife, and the fact that he was a good dad, was like a miracle, considering how he was raised. And like for him to reach that level must have taken an incredible amount of like self-control and work on himself and changing. So it was just this very eye-opening experience to realize that, you can't judge someone unless you've been in their shoes, and the way that you were raised shapes you, and you can't judge everyone with the same eye. And I feel like that's the similar situation for Kieran and Lauren. Like they have totally different experiences, and we can't view Kieran the way that we, judge him the way that we would judge somebody who grew up normally with no crazy traumatic background.
I'm very sorry about the sibling. That's incredibly tragic. I don't
Not
know
my,
really.
it wasn't my sibling. I don't
Yeah,
know his
but
family, but he told us these
still,
stories.
I'm really sorry about that. It's horrible. It we've talked about this a bit on the server about sort of Kieran and his reaction, and sort of like a lot of people see it as sort of not harming someone is kind of like the bare minimum of being a good person. Like you don't physically assault someone. That's just a basic thing of being a good person. You don't cause harm to others. And earlier I said how mental health isn't an excuse to be a bad person to people. And I still apply that to Lauren, just because she knows that people are lying, or and just because Kieran has gone through everything that he's gone through, it's still not really an excuse for him to, or for either of them to be bad people, really. It explains their actions. Let me just clarify that. Their actions are understandable and you understand where they're coming from and why they're doing what they're doing, but it doesn't excuse what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know, and as we go through life, like you understand that sometimes you have to be able to live with that, with like what the person is doing is bad, and you know, maybe hope in the future they'll be able to heal and fix it and correct it. But you know, a little bit of understanding and forgiveness does come a long way. But anyway, but you also want to make sure you don't end up in like abusive relationship or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that's another big element where people are like, oh, but he has such a dramatic background. And I know people like this who have stayed with someone way too long because of that. So it's hard. It's not always easy, right? To be forgiving and be understanding, but also not let yourself be abused. Anywho. So yeah, so this is, real life issues coming up in the story. But Lauren has that, you know, when the look that she gives him back, you can deduce that she's thinking about it as well. And, you know, Kieran goes on and he says, anyway, I've investigated Scythe for the last few days for information on his past jobs. Turns out he has quite the record. It wasn't always the most stealthy hitman out there, which again, we're not surprised. Scythe is kind of presented as a little bit of a bumbling person, not too bright. So not surprised about that. And he has a whole, you know, he's looking through his files and he says, whenever there was a witness, he'd kill them too, or at least threaten to do so. Again, classic behavior, you know, bad guy behavior. And she sounds like him. So yeah, and she's like just sitting down now. And he says, in the file, I found all the names of the people brought in for interrogation. And the woman living right beside the crime scene, you never met her because of your little outburst. So yeah. Reminding her of what she missed out on. And then you see an image of him with this cute little old lady. And, you know, he's visiting her at her house. He says she swore up and down she hadn't seen anything. So I paid her a little visit, you know, just to check if her version of the tale would still be the same now that Scythe's death is all over the papers. And so Kieran's like going out of his way, right? He's been investigating for several days and he went to pay a visit. That man, I'm just saying, he's doing something for her because he cares.
Yeah.
For sure.
Something that's kind of funny is that FastPass noticed a while back is that 𝗵𝘂𝗿𝗄𝗎 on Discord, her profile picture is currently the little old lady. And we had a dilemma a few weeks back where we were unsure if we could share a screenshot of something F said to like the in a general chat room, because technically it would be a FastPass spoiler. Out of context, but still one.
So cute, the little grandma. I was hoping, I guess, sorry, should talk about the next episode.
So Lauren, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
So Lauren gets super excited. You know, her eyes go wide and she's like, what, and what did she say? And he says she used to live right next to the alley where Scythe murdered 𝗏. She witnessed everything from her window, but Scythe noticed. And before she could tell anything to the cops or the phone, he was pointing a knife at her throat. So I guess he was fast, at least. And she, again, Lauren's just completely excited by this information. She says she confessed to you. And Kieran is so excited to say this. He said she's ready to speak in court with this big smile on his face. Well, reasonably big for him, I think. Oh, it's great. They're sharing information and he's like happy for her. He's happy that he can help her and that she can, prove something that she's been wanting to prove for a while. And like he's excited about it. It's so nice to see that.
Yeah, and like he totally didn't have to do this. Like it doesn't benefit him that much to look into this for her, but he decided to go all out and solve this case that I guess it's haunted her for a while. I mean, she doesn't know that, but like the fact that she lost her detective position over it, I guess he could deduce that it matters a lot to her.
Yeah, I love how Kieran's helping Lauren out, especially since he has access to files that she doesn't, since like she's banned from the archives. And again, he has access to probably some PS insight. Again, though, I hope we see Lauren able to fend for herself at some point, because Mindy, I think I told you this the other day, but Kieran keeps saving Lauren. he's getting her out of a bunch of sticky situations, and I'm hoping that Lauren is going to be able to get herself out of those or start saving Kieran from sticky situations. But he is a bit more qualified than she is and has more resources, but we can hope. And then something that always kind of bothered me with the grandma is that she feels I love her because like queen energy for coming up, but she feels a little bit like a deus ex machina to me. And for people who don't know, a deus ex machina, I stole this definition from Urban Dictionary. It means literally God from the machine. Deus ex machina originally referred to the Greek plays where the gods would be lowered onto the stage in order to provide a quick resolution to the story. Today, deus ex machina refers to any improbable and or overly convenient character or mechanism that comes out of nowhere and saves the character from their doom.
Right.
So it gave me a little bit of deus ex machina vibes, but I kind of understand where it's coming from. Kind of like, girl, what were you doing? So I think like I understand why she would like be afraid for her life, and I guess like you would think that she would be that like if she came to the police about it, they would protect her because she's a witness. But then again, the PS has infiltrated the police and stuff, and then we can't really expect her to lay down her life to say it. Like we can't expect her to sacrifice and put at risk her own life to save others. Like I just don't think that's something we should be expecting of people. But then again, she is old and has lived a while, and she might be ready to go. I don't know. There's so many different ways that you could approach this situation. But yeah,
he
I'm
was
like,
holding a knife to her throat. Like if I was in her place, I would say whatever they want me to say, because I'd value my life over others.
yeah, but she's also been gone for a year. Or sorry, Sykes been gone for a year. And although like she didn't know that, there was still like a big period of time where she could have come to the cops about it. And so I'm a little sus, but I also understand why she didn't tell them. He might have threatened family or something. She might have grandkids or kids of her own, but we don't know that yet. So, and we might never know. So it's just pure speculation. But
And
yeah,
if she's the only witness and somehow like he gets dragged into this again, like he's gonna know it's her, and I guess that's what kind of like that's the leverage he used against her, is that like you're the only witness, and if this like gets brought up again, then I know it's you, and I could like send somebody to kill you or something.
I mean, Sykes dead now though, so
Yeah, but like she's only coming forward after he died.
true. And then
Needed a prompt. Like he's the prompt. Like what would she have done if he hadn't come to her door? I don't know.
but yeah, she gives me some Deus Ex Machina energy, which is something that I was a little surprised about because we don't usually get those in Purple Hyacinth.
Well, I mean, personally, I'm super impressed by the amount of plot ties and mysteries they do. So I'm not surprised that there's one of those more simplistic explanations. I could never do this. This is not my thing. I could never tie. I actually was thinking about it, like, how would I go about planning it? And it's not my forte. Maybe if I tried very hard, but it wouldn't be as nice as this.
Yeah, it's amazing how everything connects.
Yes, for sure.
So Lauren is so excited by this that she like jumps out from her chair and she's like, what? And Kieran has this cute little grin on his face. He's like, obviously, I've asked her to pretend she never saw me. She just spontaneously decided to come clean. It's really cute. And Lauren is overwhelmed and she's speaking honestly. And she's like, Kieran, that's incredible. She calls him by his first name. Does she ever call him Kieran before? Remember this? I don't know. I feel like it's
so. She probably has.
But it's a personal thing, you know, like it's a respectful thing, right? You know, she's actually calling him by his name because they usually tease each other. But, you know, it's a genuine reaction from her. And, you know, she's so happy in the next statement. She says, if she's willing to change her statement, that case could be reopened. And she smiles. She's happy. She smiles, but then the next panel, she looks a little concerned and her smile like slips off her face. And she says, why are you doing this?
That part broke my heart. That she's like doubting him, even though like from his perspective, I guess it just doesn't seem that he has something to gain out of it. But she's still...
Yeah, I think that's what she was also thinking. Like, Kieran didn't have to do this. It was a personal matter between her and Sake. He didn't have to step in and help her, but he did. And you know, she still probably sees him as like the purple hyacinth, and
trust that he would be doing this just out of generosity.
Yeah,
like it has nothing to do with Loon or like their investigation. So why would he?
Yeah, and this next panel, you know, he takes a moment, like he's contemplating before he answers, and you know, it probably is a little hurtful for him to hear that, you know, that she doesn't trust that he would he's doing this just out of kindness, and then he says, no particular reason. And it's a lie. And Lauren sees that it's a lie. And she squints, but she chooses not to address this. And you know, Kieran's not stupid, right? He knows that she'll know it's a lie, but I guess he doesn't want to think of anything else to say. I don't know. I guess either. So here's the thing. So either he helped her out of the pure generosity of his heart, which is what I think is true. You could look at this in a suspicious way, or you could see this that maybe Lauren sees it in a suspicious way, because Lauren might be suspecting, remember, you know, especially after the carnival and with the lady saying that someone's going to come to betray you from close to you, she could be thinking, you know, okay, maybe this is some part of Kieran's machinations where he's going to betray me. I'm not sure if she's thinking that. Do you think she's thinking that?
Yeah, I think she's still a little suspicious of him. I mean, again, he did almost kill her, so I think it is justified for her to be suspicious, and he does have some secrets that she does not know about, and so
yeah, like she recently has been volunteering a lot more information about herself than he hasn't, like this entire season. I think the only thing he said about himself was in episode 68, or with the like, he's like, oh, those kids, I could have been one of them. But other than that, like I don't recall him ever bringing up anything about himself or his past.
Yeah,
keeping the hush.
he definitely has a bunch of skeletons in the closet that he is not telling her about, despite her showing some of hers.
Yeah, she's been a lot more open. There's still a lot of stuff that hasn't been said, but she's been a lot more open than she was in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
I like how this a lot more is relative, because it's like, it's not a lot, but yeah, relative to what she didn't say before. Yes. And he's, you know, avoidant as well. Like she turns away. Also, she's not willing to press this further and pursue this. He says, I can help you, but for this to work, and he turns away. And yes, ostensibly he's looking at the coffee, but like I think he also kind of wants to avoid eye contact with her. And, you know, you'll have to be honest about what happened between you and Sake. And he, you know, she says, I will, which is nice. And he goes to get her coffee and he says, here's your coffee, he gives it to her. And pivotal moment coming up. There's an image of the coffee cup, and like she's blurred in the background. It's a hand offering her the coffee cup, and then it's her. You see now she's in focus, and it's him, and they're just looking at each other, and it's a close-up of their faces, and it's just getting more intense and more intense. And then there's the cup, and their hands start touching on the cup. And there's a close-up of their fingers interlaced with each other. And it's like, then it just like zooms out. And then it's like you see both of their eyes are like shocked. And it kind of is like black and white. And again, there's a close-up of both of their faces and just their eyes looking at each other. And most of us were like, oh my God, this is so romantic. And then sadly, their touch just reminded them of the choking scene in episode 43, because this is what we're flashing back to: Kieran's crazed face and him slamming her against the wall and choking her. Lovely.
Yeah.
Not the romantic moment we wanted.
Is it
Not what
the
we
first
thought.
time they've touched, like physically?
I think so.
That's punching each other, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that.
Oh,
Well, I mean, she helped him. They both helped each other with their wounds. So like she dressed his back once and
no,
he helped her
like,
with her foot. Right, he wrapped up her foot once.
Since
Oh, like
43.
since episode 43.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that might be the first time, at least like skin touching, not like through blood or whatever. It's funny because I asked my sister to fast pass this episode, and I could see her getting baited by that part. She's like, "Oh, they're hand touching," and then like you could see her expression after. Like that was funny.
Oh my God. Okay, so my mom, she came back from a trip, and she reads Purple Hyacinth. I was able to get her into PH, and while she was going through the episodes that she had missed, because when she got to this hand touch scene, she literally turned over to me because she was reading on my phone and I was sitting right next to her. She turned over to me and just was like, "What?" And she like showed me the panel, and I was like, "Yep, that's what happened while you were gone." And I'm not sure if people are going to track me down for saying this because it's a controversial ship, but it kind of reminds me of Reylo, like the hand touch. Do you watch Star Wars, Mindy? Oh, okay. So there's a controversial pairing in the sequel trilogy of the Star Wars movies, and kind of there's small spoilers, but they have like a hand touch scene where they just like touch fingertips, and that's what this reminded me of.
Yeah. So I would say, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I was thinking, like the issue is not that their hands touch, but more rather than like his hand placement on the mug is what reminded them of the, like, it looks like choking part. That might be why. It's not the actual like physical touching itself, but the image that was projected. I mean, that was my thoughts when I was watching the stream. Is that just the way his hand looked, not the fact that like they touched.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because when you're holding a mug and your neck, it's kind of the same shape, like sort of a cylinder. So I guess like the way your hand would be holding it this feels so weird. I'm talking about the way Kieran would hold the neck. Oh my God. Anyways, the way that your hand would hold it is kind of similar. So yeah, I definitely think
part of me thinks that this is what that was the point of the scene rather than the actual touching.
I didn't even notice that at first. Like, that was an amazing catch.
Thank you.
So their reaction afterwards, it's pretty intense, and it shows that the level of emotional intensity that this was, and how much it means to both of them. Because she pulls the mug away, and she's sitting there and she looks away and she's holding her neck, and I just called it almost a little shim with my son's name. And Kieran is grasping his wrist, right, his hand, and he's looking down at his hand. I mean, this is pretty overt, and then he looks down at his hand, and what he sees is blood all over his hand, and he hears the word monster, and his reflection in the cup is him with his like beaming blue eyes, and presumably it's in a panel from somewhere in 43, right? Or it's a tortured image, that's for sure.
And 45, I think.
Yeah, okay. And then it disappears, and he grips his hand, and you see that it's shaking like this. And the the way I interpreted that was that he kind of hates himself for what he did.
Mhm.
And he is just so angry at himself, and he's just, you know, holding it tight. Like he wishes he hadn't done it, and he wishes he hadn't been, you know, used that hand for that, and he wishes he could control it and not have done that.
Mhm.
Sure.
Lauren is actually holding her neck. She's touching her neck when right after she gets the cup, and she does this in episode 50 as well. After they handshake, she actually touches her neck, which is to show her discomfort, especially around him, and how the events of that episode are still weighing upon her.
And she does that a lot, like whenever she's uncomfortable, but I guess he might not know that, and he might be assuming that she's, I don't know, reliving a flashback or something of what happened. But she tends to touch her neck whenever she's uncomfortable. She's done it a few times since season 1.
One of our friends on the Discord pointed this out a while back. She's a brilliant artist and writer. Her Instagram is 𝗤𝗲𝗱𝗏, so go follow her.
Yes, she's so talented.
I'm just gonna give her a shout out that she probably doesn't want. I'm sorry, Zoro.
I'm
not sorry. But anyways, Zoro, she's a brilliant theorist. She pointed out how Kieran always, we see this in the next panel after that sequence, Kieran always coughs when he's uncomfortable. So he coughs right after that when he brings up the circus. And this just, I don't know, that's like a little habit of his. And it's like, wow, it's also such an amazing catch and so brilliant on the artist's part, because, you know, the characters have their own little quirks and things. Like, just like real people.
So I will say, I actually love this whole thing. And, you know, the fact that they both get emotional about it and that it affects them, to me, you know, you don't get emotional about something you don't care about. Like, so if they had no relationship with each other, if they didn't care, if they didn't have any feelings, they wouldn't be feeling this. But, you know, they both care about each other, and they care about each other's opinion of the other person. So it's significant to them. And I think that this is a good sign, because it shows that they have a relationship rather than being indifferent to each other. And especially for Kieran, that Kieran feels regret for what he did, and regrets that she calls him, he doesn't like that she calls him a monster. He wants her to think of him, to think well of him. So that's like, it's a very good thing to me in terms of like that their relationship is there.
Like, even though the trauma is still there, like I think they've made a lot of progress in the last few episodes, especially since like 68. Like, you could tell that her view of him is changing slowly, but she's getting there.
Yeah, but they choose not to address it verbally, because he coughs, right? And he says, so he's awkward. He usually doesn't have this, by the way. He's never stuttered before or stammered. He's always very confident and brazen, but he does here. So he was, you know, taken off guard by this. He says, so when we went to the circus, you mentioned having had a little chat with 𝗤𝘂𝗍 a few days before. What exactly did he tell you? And she doesn't look at him, but she says, we didn't talk about Chow's case then. But the night we infiltrated the restaurant, I overheard him telling Belladonna about it. And you have a flashback of Ninja Lauren running through the garden. And 𝗤𝘂𝗍𝗱 is saying, I drugged his ex-wife, got her print of the knife, and hid it in her bedroom after I was done. And he says, and Kieran's like, I see, that's going to be hard to prove now that he's dead. And Lauren says, even if the witness is willing to change her statement, we also need evidence to back it up. And she says, when I saved steak last year, I found a bottle of black market sedative on him. It's called Gentle Night. By the way, Dylan Thomas has a poem, do not go gentle onto that night. So Gentle Night is well, anyway, I mean, it's, even if without the poem, it's a clear allusion to like sleeping, you know, strong enough to put a horse to sleep. And Kieran's like, yeah, I think I know that one. Would have knocked Maria out before she noticed the change in her stew seasoning. Isn't Maria the old lady? Or is Maria the Chow's wife?
Is the ex-wife.
Okay. Yeah. So she says, I wasn't able to submit it as evidence last year, but if Sake really has a record, maybe we can find other places where he used the same modus operandi and try to establish a correlation. It still wouldn't be enough, but it would be a start. And Kieran looks at her with this proud smile on his face and he says, it's your time to shine, detective. And that is so affirming, because he's building her up and he's praising her for her, you know, detective skills, and he's calling her a detective, which means like he's giving her the title that she lost, because he's saying you're worthy of that title. So it's a beautiful moment in my opinion.
It is like it's now my new favorite nickname for her, detective. Like trumps everything else. And like it's an acknowledgement of her abilities, and like she makes a great detective, and like she's talking about all those issues that like all those hurdles that they're facing with solving this case. But he's like, I know you can do it. You're a great detective. I mean, not directly, but that's what that feels like.
And he called her officer at the beginning of the episode, and that kind of just shows like the amount of change they've already sort of gone through in one episode. And when Kieran says, yeah, I think I know that one, when after talking about the sedative, it kind of makes me think that that sedative has been used on Kieran before. Like, I'm just a little sus there. How do you know how effective it is, Kieran? Have you had to like used it before? Is that what's happening? Because especially if Scythe gets the sedative from the Phantom Scythe, then it did I say Phantom Scythe? Oh my god, Phantom Scythe. Not the Phantom. If Scythe got the sedative from the Phantom Scythe, and then it might be a well-used sedative used in that group. So it might have been used by Kieran, or Kieran might have had to use that sedative on someone else. Foreshadowing.
And the episode ends with Lauren giving a little smile, little grin, happy that Kieran praised her. Oh,
I'm so happy the episode ended on like a positive note, despite that like flashback in the middle. Like at least something.
Yeah, and I think the authors think it's positive too, because their little note says, "Calm it down. A plank of driftwood isn't enough to build a ship yet." And we're like, yes, it is.
We'll just hand out to the plank.
The top comment says, "A plank of driftwood isn't enough to build a ship yet." And the second "yet" is it is in capital.
Yeah,
we're just a very optimistic fandom. Okay.
Yes.
But they have a relationship. They care about each other. He's helping with the 𝗏𝗏 case. She said thank you. He praised her ability to be a detective, and she smiled. Clearly, yeah, at least one plank.
Yeah, they're definitely going somewhere. I mean, it's not gonna happen quickly, but you could see it like developing, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. I do have one question though. Did Maria ever bring up the fact that she was drugged? And did they have any way to prove that she was drugged at the time? Because that's my question here. 𝗏𝗏 was a pretty wealthy person, I assume, because it was said before in a previous episode that he would fund a lot of 𝗤𝗏's projects. And so if the rich people like to keep the status quo, like we see Stefan wanting to keep the status quo among the wealthy, with Will marrying someone also of wealth, then it means that Maria was probably also pretty wealthy. And so if she was, even though they're divorced, if she was pretty wealthy, she probably could afford an attorney, and that would be a pretty good attorney, because you're paying good money for them, and if you're being accused of murder, you want a good attorney to get you out of that. So what was her attorney doing during all of this? Did her attorney ever bring up how Maria was drugged? Did they ever realize she was drugged? Did Maria ever say she was drugged? Did they even pause to consider that the murder weapon could be planted there? And because planting the murder weapon and getting someone's fingerprints on it is like the oldest trick in the book. Like,
yeah, it should have
been. What are these
as a
detectives thinking? Are they just going off that? Because there's so many contradictions to just using that one thing as evidence that someone murdered someone. Like, yeah, it is pretty serious, but it is also a very, generic thing that people use to frame other people.
But it could also suggest. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. It could also suggest like the APDs like in like being so incompetent, because when you have people like Herman and Power who are like interested in like resolving the case as soon as possible, then I guess the pressure of solving the case might make them like just goes the first, like, if there's enough evidence that suggests somebody has committed the crime, they would just go for that and like not try to dig deeper. Just to wrap it up quickly.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how Herman would react to cases like this, and how quickly he would want them over, because the only time we've really seen him react this way is like with the current case of Sake's death and Lauren being a potential murderer, because I mean, he thought everything about that was over with, and now Lauren is back at it and he's probably just sick of it. But maybe back then he would have been a little more careful, but then again, we don't know. But then March would have been probably the detective around that time. And so I'm like, March, sir, what are you doing? And it kind of, it's really kind of brings up the police's incompetence to this.
I'm a little more, I guess, pragmatic about it. I just think that it's a little, just again, story writing. You know, there's only so much you can make it make sense, you know, and still get your plot going, you know. I think it was just a concession to the plot.
Well, I just realized this, but maybe Harvey had some meddling in that case.
Yeah.
And then again, I don't trust March. Why do I expect more from him when I'm like 90% sure he's Phantom Scythe?
I'm so conflicted about him.
But yeah, it does also raise the question, if the Phantom Scythe is in the police, are they in the judicial system as well? Do they have judges ruling in favor of Phantom Scythe members?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. A while back, people had a theory that the Phantom Scythe was corrupting the newspapers. That they might be in the newspapers. Later on, we learned that that's not true, and that it's actually secretly the royals instead. But we don't need I guess I don't know when they're going to bring that up, but they have to at some point. So it's just corrupt people, corrupt groups, and corrupt parties all around. There is no good or bad people here. They're all bad, I guess. But they're all, I guess you could argue, kind of good, because the Phantom Scythe, even if they aren't really acting like it, what they claim to be their motive is kind of noble. I mean, it's very radical, but you also understand where they're coming from.
No, I have no tolerance for radical extremist groups. Sorry.
Yeah,
both in real life and in the comic. I think there's better ways to achieve your goals than terrorism.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
I like their goal, but I don't like how they're trying to reach that goal. Like, I like that goal of trying to create a more just and equal society, but you know, the murders are kind of like very turning me off from this group. But then again, when you see how bad the poor people are treated in Ardhalis, I'm like, you know, maybe violence is justified. But
in a way, they have a lot of rotten people in their ranks. Like, you have people like 𝗏𝗏𝗃, probably don't give a damn about, like, you know, inequality or any of that. Like, they're just genuinely bad people. So
And we see Kieran say this. We see Kieran say this in episode 65, where he's like, we're trying to remove the bad people from the Phantom Scythe. Like, and it's very obvious how Kieran, he kind of agrees with what the Phantom Scythe is doing, which is dismantling the current system. But then again, there's also a ton of terrible people in there, and if they want to create a better system afterwards and not have a just as corrupt one, then they're going to have to get rid of the bad people too. So I think there may be a conflict in the future where Kieran points out how there's actually still a lot of good people in the Phantom Scythe who are driven to it out of desperation. And Lauren's going to be like, hopefully at that point, Lauren recognizes how all the people in there aren't bad, but she might still be a little bit on the edge. Like, they're still terrorists, they're still part of a terrorist organization. And, it's another moral dilemma, because like these people were driven to violence out of desperation and necessity because they had no other options to support themselves.
I'm not nearly as sympathetic. Okay, and I don't sympathetic to some individuals who join maybe, but when an organization like that uses those means, I don't think I could ever be associated with them. And I don't have any high hopes for their utopian plans for afterwards when this is the way they're behaving now. I don't think they'll be better than anything that they try to replace given their current behavior. And I think this is, what her parents, Lauren's parents, were, recognized, because they said, we joined with idealism, and now you're taking this too far, and we don't want to be a part of this. And that's why they were killed. So I don't have any particularly high hopes for the Phantom Scythe's vision of a wonderful society.
Yeah, I'm not too sure of the world that they're going to create afterwards, because they claim that they're against the current hierarchy, but they have a hierarchy of their own. But I think the reason the Phantom Scythe exists is why I'm so sympathetic to them, because there aren't thousands of terrorists in Ardhalis, but there are thousands of people who have been spited by this system that was never designed to help them in the first place. And then the people who are supposed to be helping them aren't helping them. As we see, the cops in the poorer districts aren't as empathetic as the ones in the richer districts and precincts. And it does make you wonder, how would you act if you were in their shoes? Because most of the Phantom Scythe targets are actually rich people, like 𝗪𝗏𝗮 and Lady Grayson. They all lived in a generally wealthy area, as we see that Kim, Will, and Lauren both live near them. Will and Lauren are pretty rich, so it must have been like a relatively wealthy area. Grayson had a maid. So these people have money, and they were working for the royals, and the royals are obviously like, they don't care about the lower class. And so it's just these people, the people that the Phantom Scythe are targeting are they are working technically sort of against the lower class of the city by associating them with the royals and by helping out the royals. And it kind of just, if you were in their shoes, how would you feel towards the upper class? Because that's the main target of the Phantom Scythe, and especially like Allendale and the theater that we see Schaefer try to bomb in the prologue. Those are both places that the upper class would probably frequent, because like, shows take forever, and tickets are expensive. So it's something that the upper class would have time to go to and have the funds to pay for. So the lower class wouldn't be attending shows the way the upper class could. So that's why they would bomb the theater, because the theater is sort of a symbol of what the lower class has been spited out of, which is like, leisure and luxury like that. And Allendale was targeted because it was paid for, the construction was paid for by lower class taxes, even though the people in the lower class would never get to use the train station because it was located in areas that they didn't live in. So that's why those two places were targeted. That's why richer people are targeted by the Phantom Scythe. And
weren't those richer people like spies? Wasn't that the reason
they were also spies?
Yeah, the ones that were assassinated, I think, were because they were either working with the royal family, or they're like spies in the PS, like they're working at PS.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of just, it's really about the anger towards the upper class. And so like, if we were in the lower class's shoes, we might feel that way too. We might be out for blood like the lower classes, because the PS is basically like the perfect system or the perfect opportunity for the lower class. You get money from it, so you get income that you were in a stable job, probably stable, and then you get back at the people who made it so you couldn't get a proper job, and who made it who your kids couldn't go to school, and who made it that, and who built this system that would keep you and your family in poverty for generations. And the Phantom Scythe is this opportunity to put an end to all of this. And maybe that people think after so long being mistreated, so long being oppressed, that bloodshed is justified at this point.
I mean, I think it's a complex issue, and
Yeah, it's another.
I think that some of the, there's a little bit of misplaced blame at the wealthy class, and I think Lauren is an example of that, because she's somebody who, right, she's just lived her life. Like, she didn't ask to be, she just inherited the wealth that she was born into, right? And she is sheltered, right? And she doesn't know anything about how other people are treated. So I think she is maybe the perfect example of adding a little bit more complexity, because just because you're born wealthy doesn't mean you're accountable for the sins of your forefathers, or you live a certain way of life and you don't think about other people maybe necessarily, or you don't even know about how other people live. So I think that she may be the perfect example of understanding that it's not, you can't necessarily blame people for not knowing how the world around them operates, or the suffering that other people go through.
Oh yeah, definitely. Lauren is unaware, and technically so is the audience at first, when we first enter Ardhalis, as readers. And that's what's so amazing about it, is that Lauren is slowly learning about her place in the world and what she has done. And because even if she didn't know it, she was still a gear in this oppressive system as a police officer. And that's highlighted in 68. Why did I say 84? 84 doesn't even cover that. It's the 8s, Jesus Christ. Okay, 68. Okay, so in 68, it's highlighted about how the police can be oppressive, even if Lauren, and we didn't even really think about that much, and Lauren didn't even realize, but she's slowly learning about it, and it's only through becoming aware of these issues that you can work to stop it. And the lower class, like, it's complicated, as you said, because there isn't much room for dialogue and conversation. The lower class is obviously silenced, as we find out. Like, critical opinions against the monarchy are silenced. People who say critical things against the monarchy are arrested, as we find out in those Snapdragon pamphlets. And
well, that was back then, because I do think, 𝗥𝗲𝗱 does say there was that conversation that things have improved since then.
That's true, but then again, we also find out that the situation on the South Shore, so the poor areas, has actually gotten worse. So it's hard to say, especially considering how much secrecy there is now, and there's no more socialist groups anymore, because what's something that's incredibly devious, and I kind of respect for how sort of genius it is. Like, it's bad, but it's smart. There will be no more socialist groups in Ardhalis for maybe the next, as long as the Phantom Scythe exists, and as long as it's remembered, there may be no more socialist groups in Ardhalis, because socialism is now associated with the Phantom Scythe, and therefore socialism is now associated with terrorism. And so no one in Ardhalis is going to create a socialist group anymore. And with constant villainizing of the PS from the royals' part, the royals have in turn basically created a perfect world for themselves, where no one's going to be in opposition from them if they don't want to be deemed a terrorist.
Interesting.
And that's just, it's fascinating to think about. And just because, like, obviously Snapdragon, from what we know, Snapdragon wasn't bad. They became the Phantom Scythe later on, but as the time of the Snapdragon pamphlet, they didn't seem to be like terrorists yet, and yet they were still deemed like radicals, and I don't really remember what they're called, but it's something with a negative connotation. So it's just a lot to think about. And again, going back to the dialogue, with the conversation between them, between the upper class and the lower class, the upper class is silencing the lower class and oppressing them. In turn, the lower class is rebelling against the upper class through violence, because violence is now the only way they can be heard. And Snapdragon tried to be peaceful, and in turn, Snapdragon got massacred.
Massacred. What was that? Massacred? Did I miss something in the story?
Yeah, Orion and Sons, there was a massacre at the printing press of Snapdragon, which I'm pretty sure the royals did it, because if the royals have a history of silencing the news and silencing the press, then it would make sense for them to silence a printing press for a socialist group, because socialism is bad news for the royals. They thrive off that sweet, sweet monarchy and capitalist society. So yeah, in turn, the lower class rebels against the royals and upper class, and then in return to that, the royals villainize the lower class. And then that leads to more rebelling, and it's just this endless cycle of going back and forth. And when the tension is so high, and when the stakes are so high, and when there's blood being shed, and when everyone's just incredibly mad, you don't really expect people to try and talk to the other side. And so that's why Lauren doesn't really know about this. She doesn't really know about the lower class, and that's why maybe the lower class doesn't really take into consideration that people might not be unaware. But then again, people like Stefan are probably big contributors to upholding this system as well. So as maybe Will got older, if he did take up like some of the wealth, he might learn about the like class war, and Will might have the potential for becoming someone like Stefan, but he probably won't. I have faith in Will.
Yes, I don't think things are quite as simple, I guess. I think also because the people seem to really hate the Phantom Scythe, and they're definitely terrorized by them, and that's like the meaning of terrorism, right? When you don't strike at people that are responsible for things, you just randomly kill people, right? It strikes terror into the hearts of everybody. So like the attacks on a theater or a train station are arbitrary, right? Even if it's directed at a class, it's still, these are random people who you don't know, and you don't know anything about their life or their culpability or not. I also don't think that you can castigate a whole group of people that easily. I think this notion of class warfare it's definitely an accurate one. I don't sympathize with terrorist organizations. What can I say? Like, I don't think that's the effective manner of addressing class injustices. So, but it's definitely a huge theme. And I think that your reasoning is something that the people are experiencing, or at least some people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your viewpoint as well. Yeah, I don't sympathize with like the PS as a whole. Again, I sympathize with the people who have been forced to terrorism out of necessity, because there have been no other options for them. And that's the ironic part. People, like the American dream, people say like, if you work hard enough, you'll become wealthy and you'll do great things, but it's a lie. This is probably very cynical of me to say, but it is kind of a lie, because there's just so many barriers for different people, and depending who you are, it will be easier or it will be harder to reach certain points, and it will be harder to like gain wealth. It will be harder to collect wealth and accumulate wealth, and just so many other things, because there's so many just hurdles depending who you are. And, in Ardhalis, being poor, if you have the most hurdles to get over to be successful, because almost everyone above you is working against you.
I don't agree with that, because I think that, just living your life as a wealthy person or a middle class person, you're not actively working against anyone. You just inherited a lucky position. You were born lucky. So I think, maybe there are certain people bear some responsibility, but I think that the average Joe Schmo off the street was just born, lives his life, and doesn't do much, right? They just do their own thing, right? But I'm very curious to see 𝗏𝗏's role, because 𝗏𝗏 seems to be the voice for the people within the monarchy, and I'm curious to see what he's going to do. And we all know, right, presumably his Snapdragon passed, so I'm just very curious to see what's going to happen with him.
Yeah, I agree with what you say, that the average person like Lauren, they're unaware of their actions, and they're not really responsible for this whole class war. That would be a little bit insane to accuse them of that. But I'd say that in part, even if you aren't aware of it, there are some people, even like Lauren, if they don't know it, who are still responsible for maintaining the system. We are all cogs and gears working in this system, and even if we are against it, there are ways that we in turn sort of end up helping it. And that's just the thing. When rich people control society, they're going to want to keep their positions, and they're going to make it so that it's really hard to go against them. And like you said, it's really hard to, it's also just it's kind of impossible to sort of villainize an entire group. I think you said that earlier, like a few minutes ago. But the way that I mentioned the royals are doing to a lower class, but then again, we have seen instances like those in history when entire groups have been villainized. It maybe not to everyone, but there definitely have been groups against different groups, and there's so many different examples I could list that we'd be here for hours. But that's sort of my take on it. There are people in the Phantom Scythe who, it's just a lot of tragedy and desperation, I think. And the Phantom Scythe is just a beaming light to them. That's what I was forgetting. You said something about how we see the Phantom Scythe as a bad thing. And yeah, it is a bad thing, because people are dying. But then again, we see this story from Lauren's perspective, and she is the narrator, the biggest narrator of this. And so Lauren has lived her entire life in wealth. She's lived her entire life in the 11th precinct, probably, if her parents' house was there. And so we don't know what it is like for people who are in the lower class. We don't see the story from their perspective. The closest we've gotten is Kieran, and Kieran is definitely sympathetic to the cause of and so it is hard to say, because Lauren sees the Phantom Scythe as a bad thing, because she's a cop and she thinks killing people is wrong, and she's rich. So, but is the same necessarily true for the lower class? Do the lower class despise the Phantom Scythe as much as Lauren does? And that's a question that we just don't really know yet, because again, the Phantom Scythe has offered the lower class opportunities that they wouldn't get normally. The Phantom Scythe has offered revenge, has offered income, it has offered the hope of a better future. And even though we know as an audience that the Phantom Scythe probably won't live up to that last promise, it's the hope of a better future is still better than what the lower class currently has.
It's kind of like your average politician, where they promise a lot of things, but once they get in power, they don't really do much.
Right. This is, and I have a particular, I'm thinking of every radical group throughout history that had a revolution, and they almost all ended up in a worse system than they had before. So I just don't have very high hopes for the Phantom Scythe either. But anyway, we'll find out, right? That's what we'll see in the rest of the episodes. It's definitely a major theme of the story, so I'm curious to see how they're gonna, where they're gonna take this.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's probably very obvious, but it's one of my favorite topics in Purple Hyacinth. So yeah, I could talk for hours about it.
I'm still holding on to the hope that like Kieran and Lauren will revive Snapdragon or some kind of something modeled after Snapdragon, and hopefully like the royals will let them be this time.
I'm assuming there will be something to do with 𝗥𝗲 as a former member of the Snapdragon, plus as Lauren's godfather. I'm assuming there'll be some kind of, the change will come from there, like maybe with Lauren and 𝗥𝗲 and Kieran together. But I'm hoping for the resolution of the story to be something like that. There is a change in society. You know, maybe not like a Phantom Scythe led change, but a change.
Or at least the beginning of change. Like you could see things turning, but they're not gonna go over it. I guess it's not the point of the story, but like you could see something happening.
If Snapdragon is to work, if Kieran and Lauren are to establish a new Snapdragon, then the current system is going to have to yeet itself, because I would assume that history would repeat itself. Because Snapdragon started off with good intentions, like most people do. They have good intentions. But then over the course of the years, it eventually became the Phantom Scythe, from what we can probably assume was just the constant villainization and hatred from the public, which was influenced by the royals, because the royals, again, have control over the press. So people are pushed to extremism after being oppressed and after being silenced. And Snapdragon tried to be peaceful. They tried to be civil, and they listed things that they wanted that were, you know, justified for them to ask for, like healthcare, schooling, you know, proper housing and stuff like that. And eventually, when the system proved to still not care about them, they decided enough was enough. And that's when they became the Phantom Scythe, because they were silenced. They tried it the peaceful way. They were pacifists. They tried to be good people. And then when being good didn't work out for them because of the systems in place, constantly silencing and villainizing them, the only way for them to be really heard was to turn to violence.
Also didn't affect much either. Anyway, but yeah, definitely a very good analysis, and I think very true to life. So I want to kind of wrap up because it's late, but we're definitely going to be seeing, this whole discussion is a major theme at Purple Hyacinth, and I'm curious to see how it'll be discussed and resolved.
Yeah, it was a very fun conversation. I love this topic so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on and for sharing your insights and talks, and that's great as usual.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and we'll see you.
It's always a delight joining you. It's so fun.
Awesome, great. I'm glad. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and I'll see you all another time.
You too.
Very shortly.
Bye.